Princess Celestia, the Changeling Queen, by Vren 55. Chapter 11. New Developments. It is better to risk saving a guilty person than to condemn an innocent one. Twilight and Alternia blinked into Alternia's private chambers, giggling to themselves. Their reverie was quickly interrupted, though, as they found the unicorn stallion with a ridiculous amount of tacky military badges and the golden bars pinned to his dress uniform. Princess Celestia, I have...
Major Goldenstar, how and why do you enter my chambers? You know that not even the royal guard are allowed in my chambers, on penalty of court-martial,
reminded Alternia, an icy edge to her voice. Inwardly, she let out a sigh of relief that she had donned her disguise before teleporting to her chambers. Golden Star flinched, jingling some of his gaudy ornaments. Princess, I have overruled your guards because it's urgent. We've captured several changelings and are trying to interrogate them, but they refuse to cooperate. Alternia and Twilight's interest was caught, and they raised their eyebrows. Golden Star beamed at the pair's reaction and completely missed the worried look that passed from Twilight to the impassive Princess.
Thank you for informing us, but I warn you, do not enter my chambers without my express permission ever again.
Alternia then pursed her lips thoughtfully and added,
Major, please fetch Princess Luna and Prince Blueblood and take them to the cells. Twilight, go inform Shining Armor and help him with the wedding. I don't think this is something you'll be comfortable doing.
The Canterlot dungeons had not seen this much activity in years. 2 royal guards admitted Alternia, Luna, and Blueblood into the dungeons. There they were met with more guards that had their backs turned to them. Focus on what was within 5 steel-barred cells. The chained changelings sat tensely on the floors of their prisons. The moment the trio stepped into the dungeon, they hissed in unison, and their light blue eyes narrowed. The guards started and spun around, their eyes widening as they saw Celestia's form.
Princess Celestia, Princess Luna, and Prince Blueblood?
Said the guards, confusion replacing the reverence in their voices.
Ahem,
remarked Blueblood, officiously, a discerning eyebrow raised. Immediately the guard snapped to attention. Shaking her head at her nephew's antics, Alternia drew a solemn mask over her features.
I will speak with the prisoners, one at a time, in the interrogation room with Luna and Blueblood.
Before the guards could get another answer out, or word out, Alternia raised her hooves.
There will be no need for any escorts. I will be fine with my sister and nephew.
But, Princess, how are you going to get these savages to talk?
Asked the guard. Luna stared disbelievingly at them, who seemed almost eager for Alternia to answer the question. While Blueblood nervously glanced at his aunt, Alternia herself blinked uncomprehendingly. Then her magenta eyes seemed to burn with a barely concealed disdain.
I merely said I wish to speak with the prisoners, Major. If these changelings do not wish to talk to me, then that would be their choice, however foolish it may be,
remarked Alternia, raising her hoof. Alternia pointed to the first cell.
Let's start with her,
said Alternia. The royal guards stared at their princess in confusion. Wait, Princess, that's a she? Gasped the guard. Alternia inwardly cursed herself as she realized she had slipped up. Of course, she knew how to differentiate between changeling sexes, but none of the guards knew.
We alicorns are known far more than the common pony, and have had interactions with changelings in the distant past, said Luna cryptically.
Alternia breathed an inward sigh of relief, and as the 3 walked into the interrogation room, she smiled gratefully at Luna. The room was bare, A single wooden table with some 4 old, creaky chairs being the only furnishings.
Luna, I would prefer if you ask the questions. Blue Blood, observe them, and I'll try to glean what I can from what I know of changelings,
whispered Alternia to her friends. The Princess of the Night raised an azure eyebrow.
Shalt thou not ask the questions, Alternia?
Inquired Luna. With all due respect, Aunt Luna, you're scarier. I believe Aunt Celeste, Alternia, wishes to introduce a level of intimidation into the interrogation, piped up Blue Blood. Alternia nodded, a mischievous grin on her lips, to which Luna snorted. Still, the alicorn took the center chair and composed herself as Alternia told the guards to bring the changeling in. The changeling was young, with a strong, gleaming carapace and thick legs. The chair creaked noticeably as she was seated upon it. As the door slowly closed shut, Luna leaned forward.
What is thy name and title? Bellowed Luna, in a full-on royal canterlot deafening in confines of the interrogation room.
The changeling shook like she was weathering a blizzard. Her lips pressed so closely together they paled and her eyes averted, but she didn't answer. And things then went in a rather unexpected direction.
Oh, we are sorry we spoke too loud. What is thy name and title? Asked the princess demurely.
Alternia's eyes widened, while Blue Blood almost fell out of his chair in shock.
I won't tell you anything, stammered the changeling.
Luna shrugged nonchalantly.
But thou just told us thee will not tell us anything.
The changeling winced and covered her mouth with her hooves.
Long live Queen Chrysalis, whispered the changeling. Indeed, long live Queen Chrysalis, echoed Luna more enthusiastically while raising her hoof to the ceiling.
Everybody in the room was staring at Luna in disbelief. The changeling in particular was shaving at the alicorn's wide smile.
What are you playing at, pony?
Demanded the changeling, mouth agape in confusion.
Truly, I tell thee, changeling, we do not wish to fight with thy kind. Ponies are not great warriors. We would not be so easily beaten today if we were, said Luna as casually as if she was discussing the weather. I guess so, said the changeling uncertainly. Why, our own sister was defeated by thy queen this very day.
Alternia groaned dramatically, making sure to grimace at the same time.
And the elements of harmony were detained within your queen's grasp.
Silently thanking her mother for her instruction, Alternia swooned gracefully onto her chair, making sure to do it just like the opera she so hated, but had to attend anyway for appearances.
Surely the changelings must be a grand race. It makes us wonder how the changeling hive is constructed. It must be a glorious structure, a monument that would dwarf Canterlot, speculated Luna, hoof on her chin. Well, yes, our hive is carved into the Badlands canyons after all, remarked the changeling.
It took Alternia all her willpower to stop herself from doing a
yes
dance, but she managed. Given the momentary hesitation by Luna, it seemed she also had trouble suppressing her own joy. Oddly enough, it was Blue Blood of all ponies who kept a straight face.
Quite so. It was nice talking to you, changeling. Guards, please return her to the cell.
Luna glanced at Alternia, grinning. As the guards entered and took the changeling back to her cell, the moment the door shut, Alternia wrapped her arms around Luna, catching the alicorn by surprise.
Luna, you're a genius! How did you ever think of that?
Inquired Alternia eagerly. Luna extracted herself from Alternia's grip and coughed.
Well, fear only comes with uncertainty. As the first of her kind to be interrogated, the changeling would have been mentally prepared to be tortured, beaten, and threatened. It was better to use an unexpected approach to scare this changeling. Then, with fear, comes confusion. Only then can information be obtained from the interrogated, explained Luna. The princess frowned. However, this technique will only work when the subject is untrained, such as this one. Still, it was an impressive performance, and I think it might be something you might be interested in, said Alternia with a smile. You see, that first changeling was a drone, the worker class of the changeling hive. At Alternia's statement, Luna's brow was raised in interest. Blueblood scratched his mane, mystified at his aunt's reaction. But, Auntie, what does that have to do with any of this? Inquired the prince inconsolently. Shaking her head and mumbling something about the education of equestrian nobility, Luna glanced at Blueblood. Nephew, ask yourself this question. What is a worker doing on the front lines of a major changeling offensive, which is exclusively a job for soldiers? Blueblood blinked, and his lips curled in a silent, "Oh." So Queen Chrysalis was desperate enough to order untrained changelings into battle? But why? Wondered Blueblood, tapping the table. Luna remained silent, biting her lip in frustration. I have a hunch, but I need to confirm it, said Alternia contemplatively. She turned to Luna. Why don't we let Blueblood take over this time and continue this type of interrogation? Blueblood nodded, and the three resumed their seats, but Luna leaned over to Alternia, her eyes narrowed. Are you sure letting a soft prince lead the interrogation is a good idea? Whispered Luna into her ear. Trust me on this. Blueblood is picky, but if anything, he's good at making conversation. One way or another, replied Alternia. It was then Luna noticed the wicked glint in the changeling's eye, and decided to abandon her line of questioning. The second changeling was a male, and smaller than the first one. Despite the rough handling by the guards, his gaunt face remained emotionless, not unlike a stone. Blueblood sat on his chair, leaning back, shoulders completely relaxed. So, changeling, tell me a little about yourself. Perhaps your name, suggested the prince. Luna groaned inwardly at her nephew's all too genial tone. There was no way he was going to get anything out of this changeling, who was far more contained than the first. Sure enough, he didn't. The changeling was silent. To that, Blueblood simply shrugged, produced a silk handkerchief from his jacket, and coughed daintily into it. After doing so, he pocketed the handkerchief and shifted around in his chair. Luna glanced at Alternia, who had the tiniest hint of a smile on her lips. Trust him, was what the smile said. Luna was beginning to find it increasingly difficult to quell her frustration. Finally, Blueblood stopped wiggling around and sighed happily. All right. Well, if you won't tell me anything about yourself, then I shall. I am Prince Blueblood, the 15th Royal Prince of Equestria, Duke of Canterlot, Lord of the... Long while later. And that's how the Blueblood's family is related to the line of Princess Platinum. A single hair in Luna's ethereal mane twanged out of place as the alicorn stared at the prince. Her pupils had shrunk to pinpricks, and her eyes were as wide as frisbees. Now she realized the meaning of the prince's earlier antics. He was getting himself comfortable so he could go on the most boring history lecture, give in. Perhaps Twilight Sparkle and even Star Swirl the Beard himself would have grown stiff enough from that extremely tangential oration to be felled like petrified trees. My, you really sat through all of that. Normally, ponies scream for me to stop after the first 5 minutes, remarked Blueblood happily. The prisoner croaked,
and it seemed to sway slightly forwards and backwards. If Luna wasn't so frazzled, she would have sworn his tail was twitching. In that case, we'll continue the history of Equestria according to...
Nephew, I believe you have done your best, rasped Alternia.
Luna strained her stiff muscles to see Alternia's harrowed visage. Her right eyelid was twitching erratically. Her mane had stopped flowing, and it no longer sparkled.
I have to say that I am surprised by your constant attention, young hatchling. Not every changeling would have sat through my nephew's lecture without at least trying to tune it out, said Alternia. She shook her head to clear it, then asked her final question. Do you have a family to worry about? Somehow the changeling seemed to wilt at the question. Yet it was only for a moment before his stoic expression returned. With a sigh, Alternia called for the guards to take the changeling away before returning to her friends. I believe, nephew, that while your tactic was effective, it was perhaps too effective? Rasped Alternia, still in a daze. Blue Blood humphed indignantly, but was quelled by Alternia's groan. I concur, added Luna. Blue Blood sighed, only for Alternia to place a comforting hoof on his shoulder. Still, thanks to Blue Blood wearing down the infiltrator, I was able to get a reaction out of him. Infiltrator? Questioned Luna. Alternia gently tapped her forehead with her hoof. The changeling was an infiltrator, or as we sometimes call them, a love collector. Normally his job is to collect love from pony settlements he has embedded himself in. Yet he was part of a purely offensive attack, where his skills became meaningless, continued Luna, eyes narrowed in suspicion. The changeling nodded sagely. Precisely. What's more, his reaction when I asked him the last question was most curious. I think I know what is ailing Chrysalis's hive, but I do not know why. Perhaps the next one will give us an answer, said Blue Blood optimistically. Maybe. I shall interrogate him, said Alternia. The third changeling was also a male. Unlike the infiltrator, though, he had a very thick, heavy-looking carapace that was heavily notched and scratched. Some of these wounds were new. Alternia could tell he had been in the thick of the fighting in Canterlot. That, and the hardened look in his eyes, identified him to Alternia as one of the soldier caste. However, it was the older wounds that intrigued the changeling, particularly 4 pockmarks on his neck. It looked as if he had been bitten by another changeling. What is your name? Inquired Alternia, her voice regal, yet sincerely kind. It had been too long since Alternia had talked to her own kind, and even if they were across opposing sides, she still wished contact. This time, she was rewarded. It is none of your business, grunted the changeling. If Alternia hadn't been playing the part as princess, she would have been doing a jig on her seat in glee. Then I shall not demand you of it, shieldling, said Alternia. The changeling startled, and Alternia grinned inwardly. It seemed that some of the past changeling customs and titles had survived in Chrysalis's hive. How? How do you know that, pony? Demanded the changeling, his buzzing lips charged with disbelief. Your carapace is littered with wounds, both new and old. It is obvious as to what your profession is, shieldling. Not to mention, I am wise beyond your years, said Alternia. The changeling frowned. That title is one that has not been used since bygone days to describe the protectors of our hive. The soldier turned his head down to the bare title and table. It is a title I do not deserve. Alternia leaned forward a bit, her voice gentle. And why not? Your conduct is admirable, and if I am not mistaken, you are well educated too.
For a moment, the changeling relaxed, but just as he did, he flinched and tightened up. You're just being nice in order to make me lower my guard. You will get nothing from me.
I would be deceiving you if I said that all I wanted to do was talk. But it has been a while since I have conversed with your kind, said Alternia truthfully. She calmly met the changeling's wary gaze with her own. We ponies do not wish harm upon your people. It is not too late for the changeling race to make peace.
The soldier sighed. Perhaps for other hives. But even before we attacked Canterlot, it was too late for our hive.
Alternia blinked. What do you mean?
His gaze hardening, the soldier met Alternia's eyes. She who raises the sun, you are indeed wise and cunning, as the legends say. Yet be warned, our hive will not leave this world quietly. Your kind are not the first who have tried to remove us. I will say no more on this matter.
Alternia nodded in understanding and called for the guards to take the changeling away. That was enlightening, but at the same time of great concern, said Luna. The Luna princess appeared unworried, except for the telltale sign of her tail, which swung slowly from side to side. Alternia's eyes were narrowed, and her hoof was absent-mindedly drawing a circle on the table. I agree. I think I can confidently tell you my findings. The changeling stood on her hooves and faced her fellow interrogators. We know that the chief reasoning the changelings attacked was for love, their food source. However, what I didn't realize until today was that, to a great degree, their attack was made out of desperation, announced Alternia. The changeling focused on the alicorn. Luna, you fought the changelings at the royal wedding. Can you tell us how well they fought? Luna coughed, recalling how she and her Luna guards had been ambushed as she had been preparing for the wedding's reception. Not very well at all. They tried to overwhelm myself and my entourage with their numbers. Needless to say, they did not succeed. I talked to my student earlier. She and her friends had managed to fight off an entire platoon of changelings. While I do not doubt the capabilities of my students and her friends, the fact they did so without any significant injuries amazed me. Blueblood, you have an eye for detail. Did you notice anything in particular about the prisoners? Blueblood stopped running a hoof through his immaculate mane and slowly raised a hoof to his chin. They looked a little on the thin side, Auntie. In particular, the holes on their legs were gapingly wide. I mean, you have holes in your legs, but theirs were rather large. Now put together the guarded reactions of the changeling to my questions about their hive or family's well-being, and the soldier's statement that it was too late for our hive. Even before Alternia finished, Luna's eyes had widened in realization. Blueblood had to listen to the rest of what his aunt had to say, and then ponder for a moment longer. Yet, as the prince came to the same conclusion as Luna did, he gasped. Auntie, are you saying that the changelings attacked Canterlot because they were starving? Demanded Blueblood. Yes. However, as to what forced Chrysalis's hive into such a sorry state, I am not so certain of. It may appear that they have been in conflict with another hive, said Alternia haltingly. That would make the most sense. Who else could have been the other enemy that had tried to remove the changelings? If our neighbors had a confrontation on a scale of it, it would have forced Chrysalis to such actions. We would have surely heard of it, pointed out Luna. Alternia nodded her approval. I also suspect that the bite mark on the soldier's neck was from another changeling, added Alternia. To Blueblood and Luna's surprised glances, she snorted. I mean,
It didn't look like it came from any other animal in the royal menageries or from any species we know of. Alternia grinned and rubbed the top of Blue Blood's head affectionately despite his protests. You're right, Blue Blood. Let's focus on finding out who could have forced Chrysalis's hoof. The mere existence of this mysterious hive, or hives, will make it far more difficult to predict Chrysalis's actions and will create complications if we wish to mount an effective defense of Equestria, said Alternia. Luna and Blue Blood agreed and took their seats. The fourth changeling struggled as she was brought into the room. As she was roughly deposited onto the chair where she still sat, facing the looks of two alicorns and an abnormally serious prince. Hello, what is thy name? Asked Luna. The changeling sneered at the princesses, her fangs gleaming in the dim light of the shadows. Cut to the chase, princess. Do you want me to blast you with your magic? Or perhaps you would like to hit me with your slippered hooves and scare me, Nightmare Moon? Luna almost knocked her chair over as she lunged at the prisoner. But Blue Blood quickly grabbed the princess's leg, restraining her, firmly pulling his aunt down to her chair. Blue Blood gave his most winning smile at the changeling. The gleaming grin that would have caused any mare in Equestria to faint didn't even elicit a snort from its target. Undaunted, the prince employed his silkiest, most boyish tone. There's no need for that, miss. We ponies here are civilized creatures. Surely we can come to a compromise, proposed Blue Blood. Most females would faint at this amount of charm, but Blue Blood's lack of experience in courting changelings doomed him to failure. For his efforts, the prince was met with a green spit to his face. With a high-pitched squeak, Blue Blood fell off his chair, his hooves pawing for his hoofkerchiefs as he tried to wipe away every drop. You ponies are so soft. All you know is peace and happiness. I knew you couldn't get anything useful from my comrades. They were all dragged out with not even a scratch on their shells. It's like you don't want to interrogate us. Come on, ponies, scare me, bellowed the changeling, her challenge echoing through the confines of the chamber. With a coarse, ear-grating hell screech, Alternia moved her chair away from the table and stood on her hooves, trotting slowly, methodically, to the changeling's side. Her flowing tail trickled, slowly, uncoiling like a dragon's. Perhaps the darkest part of my heart wishes to do so, but there are other ways to inspire fear in one's heart. Isn't that right, Chevalier? Asked Alternia. Her voice was soft, too soft. It sent shivers up Blue Blood's and even Luna's spines. The changeling raised an eyebrow. You're gonna have to do better than that, sunbutt. The insult didn't even make Alternia flinch. I can do much better. I know what forced your queen to attack Camelot, said the princess, her voice oddly calm. This made dread spread across the changeling's face. Alternia continued, each word striking like an arrow into its target. You are hungry, desperate for love, and yet there is none to be had. Your forces here are in great number, but the majority of them are enlisted workers, infiltrators, and soldiers that have seen far too many battles. It's not an army. It's an untrained, weaponless militia fielded against the greatest city of Ponydom in a desperate bid to take it and enslave the love of its inhabitants. Even if your plan had succeeded, the love would have only been enough to feed you for a few months. But that's how desperate your queen was. The Chevalier threw herself forward in a vain attempt to sink her fangs into Alternia's neck, but she danced out of her reach. You know nothing, you pampered prissy princess. You have everything you could ever want. Those who love you, minions to serve you. You have never been pushed to the brink of despair and death. Her memories, Alternia saw her sister's spear arching toward her, felt the pain as it pierced her stomach, the vast emptiness as her eyes had begun to close, her immeasurable sorrow at being unable to avenge her mother's death. 1,000 years had only tinged the grief she felt that one day.
You're right, Changeling. Hatchling. I do not know your despair, but I am not alien to it. What's more, I have also been to the brink of death, said Alternia. Her voice tightened with restraint. All of a sudden, her face warped into a snarl so horrifying it would not look out of place on Nightmare Moon's features. But I did not lock a loving bride into a cavern for her to starve. I did not deceive her loving groom to betray the country he loved. I did not launch a cowardly attack on a race without trying to negotiate, without any formal declaration of war, and on a day of celebration, roared Alternia, her roar breaking like the roar of thunder in the distance. It blasted the breath and bravado out of the Chevalier and bound her to the wooden chair as effectively as ropes. Whereas a few moments ago the Changeling was trying to attack Alternia, now she was squirming in her seat in a hopeless effort to escape. It fills me with pity to see that Chrysalis's Chevaliers have fallen so far. Have you faced any worthy opponents in your life? Sighed Alternia, her mocking edge cutting the air like a whip. Recoiling as if she had slapped, the Changeling snarled, but her body shivered. I fought manticores, giant scorpions, and the Shadow Empire more than anything your royal guard has ever seen. This time it was Luna's turn to snort diversely. The Alicorn reclined on her chair, nonchalantly turning away from the Chevalier, mocking grin on her features. Manticores and great scorpions, they are but twisted monsters, easy for any untrained squad to handle. And in all my long years, I've never even heard of this Shadow Empire. Of course you wouldn't. Those changelings stalk in the darkness, hiding amongst ponies, ready to strike our hive mates at any moment. When they are done, they blend back into the crowd like ghosts. They're not normal changelings. Alternia twisted her head slightly to look at the Chevalier. Not normal changelings. What made them so abnormal? They don't run. They fight like dragons protecting their hordes. The Chevalier stopped, her jaw agape. You tricked me. You cunning! Alternia and Luna winced as they realized the act was up, and the Changeling began to blaze away at the trio with obscenities. Most of it were in a half-intelligible buzzes and hisses that made the Changeling language. Luna and Blueblood cringed as the guards that Alternia had summoned dragged the snapping Changeling away from the table in the interrogation room. The poor wooden table groaned in protest as if it was battered by the flailing Changeling, but held with a flash of his horn. With a flash of his horn, Blueblood shut the door behind the departing guards with his magic and shook his head. This is bad, said Blueblood. For once, we do not disagree with thy pronouncement, nephew. You're dealing with an unusually powerful third hive, one who is likely responsible for pushing Chrysalis's hive to launch an attack on our ponies, not to mention their fighting prowess worries us considerably, said Luna, her teeth grinding together. The Alicorn was no longer able to hide her nervousness. Luna, you will have to call that. This is far more serious than I could have ever thought, groaned Alternia, sitting so heavily into her chair that it nearly fell apart. Luna glared at Alternia. I thought we were going to call that regardless. I hoped it could be avoided, but it was naive of me.
Send in the last prisoner. While Blue Blood was mystified at the mysterious that in which his aunts were speaking of, he nodded and magically opened the door to call for the guards. A moment later, they had unlocked the last cell and brought the last captured changelings in. The changeling sat down slowly in an iron interrogation chair by the guards, who quickly exited the room. Meanwhile, Alternia examined the changeling through impassive eyes, although she was secretly surprised. Female, with a light and sleek build, large wings, large ears, and a small horn. A scout. And why are her eyes light green? Pondered Alternia. Luna leant forward, but not too close to the changeling. What is thy name? Demanded the princess. The changeling squirmed in her seat, her chains clinking as she shifted. And to everyone's surprise, the changeling looked up and spoke. Has this room been warded for sound? Whispered the changeling, her raspy, quiet voice emptying into the silent room. Alternia nodded and confused by the changeling's question, like she had been released from silence. The changeling scrambled to the floor, knocking the chair out of the way in the process. Luna and Blue Blood jumped to their hooves, but froze in disbelief as the changeling prostrated herself at Alternia's hooves. Forgive me, princess. I'm Syndra, a maid at Canterlot Castle. Please, Princess Celestia, you have to believe me. I wanted no part in attacking Canterlot, pleaded the changeling. Luna was gawking. Alternia's eyes were wide with unsuppressed surprise, and Blue Blood looked as if he was going to faint. But you are a changeling, are you not? The changeling was crying, her pupilless eyes moist. Yes, I am, but you have to believe me. I knew nothing of what Queen Chrysalis was planning. I haven't been back at her hive in years. I left the hive a long time ago and have lived here happily in Canterlot as a pony ever since. Luna's eyes traveled over to Alternia, who had raised herself from her chair, now stood at her full height looking down on the trembling changeling. Why would a changeling separate from her own hive? Asked Alternia, her voice low. She knew it could be possible, but it happened rarely. The Everfree Hive had changelings who went rogue, but they were very few and far between. At the question, Syndra's rather large ears drooped down and she sighed. I was exiled, Princess. I was sent on a scouting mission to the Dragonlands, but I failed and put my fellow scouts in danger. I was to be sentenced to death, but my life was spared and I was exiled. Instead, whimpered Syndra. Alternia paused for a moment in thought, and then her heart began to pound wildly in her chest. Changelings never exiled changelings. It was too dangerous. Every changeling knew too many secrets of the hive, and even one slip-up by an exile could cause disaster. Someone must have intervened for Syndra. But whom? Who could be powerful enough in a hive to interfere with the sentencing of a changeling? Then it clicked. There was only one changeling in a hive with the position to alter the laws of a hive. And there would only be one reason why that changeling would intervene on behalf of the scout. Your mother. Who is she? Asked Alternia, the ivory mask on her face paler than ever, and her mane flow simply halting as if frozen, its colors darkening. Cold fury wrapped around the muscles in her legs and neck and began tightening and twisting them. Queen Chrysalis, Princess, whimpered Syndra. For Alternia could seize her sister's spawn in her magic, she felt Luna's hoof on her shoulder, whipping her head to glare at the princess. Alternia followed Luna's silent hoof back to Syndra and stopped. The changeling was curled up in the corner, perforated hooves, trying to hide her head, and tears streaming down her face, and her chitinous body shaking in fear. The long shadow of an alicorn was cast on her, like the limb of some great monstrous beast. All of Alternia's anger was doused like a torrent of water had been splashed onto her head, while guilt, a bitter stinging slap to the face, took its place. "Syndra?" asked Alternia quietly. The changeling stole a peek through the appendage's inner holes.
Yes, princess?"
Stuttered Syndra. "I'm sorry for frightening you." Alternia slid down to the floor, tucking her face closer to the shivering changeling. "It's been a horrible day for all of Canterlot, and especially you. You didn't mean to harm any pony, right?" Syndra shook her head, hooves uselessly trying to wipe away her tears.
"I saw the changelings swarming into the castle, so I hid in the kitchen pantry. But then that wave of love slammed me against the wall and tore off my disguise. The next thing I know, I was surrounded by spear points and put in chairs. I know I'm clumsy, and I have had some fun with the odd royal guard, but I never hurt any pony."
Alternia chuckled. "And I know you didn't, Syndra. It was wrong of me to get so angry. However, things have changed, little one." Alternia bit her lip, her expression remaining pensive for several long seconds until she suddenly brightened. "Syndra, I know of a way to release you, but I need you to do exactly what I say." She did. "What?" demanded Golden Star in shock. Blue Blood wailed into his hoofkerchief, tears flowing freely from his eyes. "She tried to cast the portal out of the interrogation room, but the spells preventing such an action activated, and she... Blue Blood swooned dramatically, causing literally all the guards to rush forward to support him. None of them noticed a rather small royal guardsman leaving the dungeon. Seeing this out of the corner of her eye, Luna nodded to Alternia, whom after a pause spoke over the clamoring guards. "He's fine, gentle stallions. Besides, we have more pressing matters to be concerned with," said Alternia, her brow furrowing. The changeling's lungs swelled, and she seemed to grow in stature. "I'm convening an emergency meeting of the equestrian chiefs of staff." While Blue Blood had been taken away to his quarters by the guards, Luna and Alternia trotted cautiously to the doors of the royal chambers, where the latter had asked Syndra to meet them. "Alternia, art thou sure about this? We do not know if we completely trust Syndra. It could be an act," whispered Luna. Alternia glanced at the alicorn, her eyes narrowed. "I thought you trusted her story." At the question, Luna flinched. "Well, what we did was done more out of pity than out of trust," admitted the alicorn. The changeling's frown faded, a soft smile replacing it, and her mane seemed to twinkle just a little brighter. "Whatever Syndra decides to do, Luna, I am glad that you were there to stop me." With that, Alternia opened the door, and the two stepped in to find a hovering Pegasus mare with an olive black mane and smoky white fur, busily dusting a chandelier. No changeling, or no waiting mare or stallion, just a maid. Luna groaned, and Alternia sighed. "Well, it looks like we've been deceived," muttered the changeling, raising her voice. Alternia addressed the maid. "Cinderhooves, I need to talk to my sister in private. Would you mind leaving for a moment?" In Alternia's voice, Cinderhooves fell out of the air and crashed into the ground. Both Alternia and Luna started and rushed forward, concern written on their faces, which swiftly vanished as Cinderhooves' white fur burned away to reveal Onyx Chitin. "It's me, princess," said the changeling, bowing low. Alternia's jaw dropped slightly open in surprise. Syndra? You were Cinderhoofs? Thou knowest her, exclaimed Luna, her own mouth ajar. Cinder's worked as my personal maid ever since you returned, explained Alternia, making a visible effort to smooth the features of her disguise. The fact that the diligent yet occasionally clumsy Pegasus that dusted her chambers every day was a changeling had taken Alternia by shock and reawakened old suspicions. Although the name had been rather obvious. Syndra, tell me honestly, was everything you said in the prison true? Syndra nodded fervently, her head bobbing up and down so fast that her ears flipped back and forth. Yes, I haven't seen my mother ever since I had been exiled. The changeling stopped nodding, her ears hanging down. I have wanted to see her for so long. And when I did, she was attacking Canterlot. A pang struck Alternia's heart, and she smiled sympathetically. In that case, what do you feel about ponies? Syndra smiled. From the way the corners of her mouth twitched, it was as if it was a foreign expression. Alternia guessed it had been a while since she had been able to smile so freely. I like them. In my hive, I had comrades, but in Equestria, I have friends. And while I can never tell them my secret, I still care for them. Cinder crossed her front hooves. I wouldn't want to see my pony friends come to any harm. But I also love my mother. Alternia bit her lip for a moment. She really pitied Syndra, but she knew she had to protect her ponies. And currently, the conflicted changelings in front of her may be Equestria's salvation. Syndra, let me be honest with you. Equestria will have to respond to the threat of your mother and her hive pose. If you wish to keep serving me and living life among ponies, I need your word that I can trust you, despite what I may be forced to do to your mother. Alternia waited patiently, her face expressionless, while Luna did her best to stay impassive as Syndra trembled. Finally, Syndra turned to Alternia, a resigned look in her eyes. I understand, Princess. I don't know why my mother did this. I mean, I know she doesn't like ponies, but the changelings need the love of ponies. To attack Canterlot seems like suicide. But then again, Mother would do anything for her hive. Alternia sighed, for she knew what she would say next was not going to go well. That's very honorable of your mother. Unfortunately, Syndra, I have a more difficult request for you. Every changeling hive has different infiltration procedures or strategies. I need you to tell me your mother's hive infiltrates equestrian towns and how. Her tone low and her brow slightly pinched together. At this, Syndra's eyes widened. When she scuttled backwards away from Alternia and Luna until she reached the chamber's wall, the changeling had begun to quiver, barely able to stand on her legs. How do you know that? Stammered the changeling. I know more about changelings than you may realize, Syndra. Please, I have to know, pleaded Alternia softly. But Syndra only pressed herself closer to the wall, her voice more panicked than ever. No, I won't tell you. Please, don't ask this of me, Princess. I can't betray my hive. But they have exiled thee already. Why should thou remain loyal to them? Asked Luna. Syndra turned away from Luna's questioning gaze. They exiled me because I failed them and my mother. I deserved my punishment, and I cannot fail them once again. Luna sighed, when Alternia shot the alicorn a warning glance. Quietly, she approached the changeling. Syndra drew her hooves closer to to herself, but Alternia merely sat down in front of her.
Syndra, I know you love your mother, but she has not only threatened my ponies, but has jeopardized the survival of the entire changeling species. She has revealed the changelings to the world of ponies as a hostile race, ready to conquer them. Unless chrysalis is stopped, ponies will grow in fear of the changelings, and I cannot guarantee I will be able to protect you or your race or your mother.
Syndra looked up into the depths of the princess's magenta eyes, eyes that did not judge her, but reflected steely determination, as well as compassion and sympathy. Syndra blinked in confusion. Was there a twinkle of turquoise-green light in those eyes?
I will tell you,
whispered Syndra quietly. A long hour later, Syndra finished, her throat hoarse and her jaws aching. Celestia was smiling, while Luna seemed concerned, but Syndra barely noticed. All she could do was look down, her gaze unfocused. Slowly, the changeling dragged a hoof across the carpet. She knew what she had to do, but she felt like she had driven a sword into herself. Without warning, the princess smiled and embraced her. The changeling stiffened in surprise at the action, yet couldn't help but relax in Celestia's comforting, well-groomed fur.
You did very well, hatchling,
said Celestia. The princess's horn glowed, and Syndra suddenly felt a warm feeling seep into her carapace. The changeling's eyes widened, just as she was released from the embrace. I will see you tonight, Cinderhooves. For now, though, I have a meeting to attend, spoke Celestia with a nod to Luna. The pair exited the chambers, leaving Syndra staring at closed doors. Only one question remained on the changeling's mind, and it distracted her from everything, even from what she had to do to save her race.
Was that love energy?
Syndra whispered. Alternia, what type of fun did Syndra mean when she said, I had some fun with the odd royal guard? We do not understand her choice of language, asked Luna. Alternia merely stared at the alicorn for a few seconds before bursting into uncontrollable fits of laughter, while Luna continued to stare curiously at the changeling in disguise. Why art thou laughing? asked Luna, bemused. Alternia, a cheeky grin on her face, leaned down to Luna and whispered into it. The princess blinked several times, and to her credit, didn't blush, merely inclined her head in acceptance. Ah, we see. How does thy own species mate, anyway? Inquired Luna, without even batting an eyelid. Much to her own chagrin, Alternia was unable to stop the flush that crept over her cheeks.